My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. I've been fascinated with UFOs since my own experiences as a child in the 1950s and 60s. For as far back as I can remember, I would wake up in the middle of the night, be drawn to the window, and see objects in the sky, often in formation. I also have distinct memories of what some have called abduction, but in my personal experience have been referred to as night school. I recently learned of the work of my guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Mary A. Joyce. Mary is editor of Skyships Over Cashiers website, which has been covering a wide variety of cutting-edge topics since 2008. Topics include UFOs, secret underground bases in North Carolina and Tennessee, Bigfoot, Cherokee little people, archaeological finds, and testimonies from those with above top secret security clearances. Mary's newspaper experience has made the website a source for reliable information. She's worked for 2 major metropolitan area newspapers as a feature editor, Sunday magazine editor, columnist, and artist. Because of that experience, the website postings are well researched, easy to read, and always enhanced with photos and graphics. She's also written books. The most recent ones are Cherokee Little People Were Real, Underground Military Bases Hidden in North Carolina Mountains, and Tangible Evidence of Jesus Left Behind for Us to Find, which focuses on scientific and archaeological discoveries about Jesus. Because of her books and website, Mary's been a frequent guest on radio and TV shows including Coast to Coast AM, the Travel Channel, and internet TV shows in Ireland and Australia. In addition to writing, Mary's career includes working for a major metropolitan air pollution control agency, a community college, 8 successful political campaigns, the world's largest private printing company, and a Fortune 100 company where she worked directly with many creative teams, including those at Marvel Comics, Golden Books, Mr. Rogers, Berenstain Bears, and Steven Spielberg's E.T. book staff. She joins me this week to discuss her research and share her story. Please welcome to Destination Unlimited, Mary A. Joyce. Welcome, Mary.
Well, thank you. It's good to hear your magnificent voice.
Oh, thank you very much. I hope that this voice is informative and also healing at times, and that's what my purpose with my voice is, but thank you. Mary, let's start with your background and path. From your bio, you've had many successful and diversified callings. How did this all start for you?
You're talking about the website now, I assume.
Well, actually, let's go way back. Let's start with your early years and your early careers.
Actually, unlike you, I was not into any of the UFO things until I was living on the beach in Florida. At that time, I was working for Brevard Community College, and that's where I began to see UFOs. And since then, I've been very, very interested in the subject.
And what about your other career paths? Just tell us a little bit about your newspaper work and your work with all of these corporations and the political work, just a little bit so we know your background.
I worked for the Orlando Sentinel, started out as an artist, and then I began doing an art column for them, began to do judging for art shows, did the Disney show for determining which artists would be in their big annual show. And after that, I went to a newspaper in Michigan. Technically, I call it a suburban Detroit paper. It was a daily called the Oakland Press. And that was really a step up, even though it was a smaller paper, because I went from reporter to Sunday magazine editor to feature editor. So that is one of my careers. And I'm old enough to have chalked up a lot of different things. And I certainly don't want to bore you to death with all of that.
I think we've both been through similar paths, having diversified things in our lives, and I completely understand what you're saying. So you mentioned being on the beach and having a UFO sighting. Describe that for us.
I live between Patrick Air Force Base and the Space Center. So when they would have these secret launches, there was nothing secret about them because we would see all these specialty planes and all these, government-type cars coming in before any kind of a launch. And I've actually seen UFOs show up when the launches happen. And one of the memorable events, which has nothing to do with the UFO, but I was there driving on Highway A1A when the Challenger exploded. And I looked up in the sky and I knew, because I'd seen other launches, that something was dreadfully wrong. And I pulled off to the side of the road, turned on the news. So I was getting the live report on my radio while I'm actually watching it through my windshield. It's one of those memories I won't forget.
Absolutely. So,
and
I'm
I
sorry.
met a number of people who worked for NASA when I was there. And one of the things that kind of surprised me was one of the engineers who I became friends with. He came to my place one day and had a big box of metaphysical books. And he said that the people there at NASA were very familiar with things like Alice Bailey, which I think was mainly what he was giving me at that time, which is theosophy.
Actually, I remember reading that Jack Parsons, who was one of the pioneers in the rocketry field, was actually a member of the OTO and a follower of Aleister Crowley. So there has been
great diversity. They're not just engineers, with a computer in their hand. They are, many of them, very interested in multiple topics, and certainly many of them have a very broad perspective on the universe.
Now, prior to having your own experiences in Florida, had you had any interest in this in your earlier life? Had you had any other experiences that were unusual?
Nope, I'm not one of those childhood connectees. It all came to me as an adult.
So please tell us about the North Mountains and the Cashiers area of North Carolina. How did you arrive there? What's the community like?
Well, I can get a little metaphysical on you. Was given a message when I was living on the beach that said someday I would be living in North Carolina and not to worry about it. It would be really crystal clear when it was time for me to move. And after that, I was living in the Ocala National Forest, which is also in Florida. And I made a trip, and when I came back, there were enormous fires going on. It was very, very dry that season. And there were 4 roads into where I lived on a lake in the forest. And when I came up to one, a tree fell down, couldn't get by it. Of the 4 roads in, there was only one way to get in. And I took that as a sign as it was time to head off to North Carolina, and that's where I ended up.
So tell us about the North Mountains and Cashiers, and what is it like there? What's the community like?
I'll concentrate on Cashiers because that's where all the UFO sightings really started. They really inspired the website. And Cashiers is in western North Carolina. It's a ridgetop community that's kind of quiet in the wintertime, but in the summer and fall, all the people from the flatlands come there to get cooler and enjoy the mountains. And that's where it all began. It's very beautiful terrain. And Cashiers is a very small crossroad type community, pretty much surrounded by trees and mountains, which might explain why we have Bigfoot sightings in the same area.
And what are the people like there?
We have the people that are part-timers. They usually have a second home in Cashiers, so they would be, I would say, well off. And then we have the people that live there year-round. Some of them are also well off, but then you have the people who also provide all the services for any community. So you have quite a range of economic levels in Cashiers.
What's the tradition of the town? Is it a rich history? Is there a lot of folklore there?
Not tremendously, no. It was kind of like a bare mountain. I'm not a bare mountain, but an undeveloped area when it was first settled in the 1800s. The Indians did believe that Whiteside Mountain was a very special place, And Whiteside Mountain is a granite and crystal mountain, and it's right there outside of Cashers. Our own theory here at the website is that it functions as an omni, like you would have an omni for regular air traffic. And the reason we say that is because quartz was used in the first radios, and quartz diodes are still used in computers today. And that might serve as an omni for ships coming in from other places. That may be the reason we see so many coming in there.
So this mountain, you said, was granite and also quartz crystal, and so in essence, this is sort of a beaming point for spacecraft, correct?
Well, the mountain just sits there, and I think because of the crystalline structure, the UFOs may possibly use it as a way of, zeroing in on where they want to land. There could be other theories too. Not too far from this area, there is one of the 5 secret underground military bases that I've written about. There could be a connection there. That is not lightly said, because we've seen UFOs around this facility, and we've seen them go into a lake just to the west of the facility, which may indicate it's like an underground entrance to the facility, which is hidden beneath something called the Perry Astronomical Research Institute. It originally was a Department of Defense operation where they would monitor satellites back during the Cold War. That supposedly is not happening at all now. It's been turned over, again, supposedly, to an educational group for astronomy, and groups can go there to, use the telescopes to look at the sky. However, we're very convinced there's so much more than that, and we've actually had 2 people with above top secret security tell us that there is a city-size facility beneath the Perry Center that's self-sufficient and quite large. So that could be another reason that the UFOs are interested in that. There may be indeed cooperation between the aliens and our military.
And we'll touch upon more of that in the next segment. My guest is Mary A. Joyce, and we'll be back with more on these topics and more after these words on the OMTimes radio network.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millisers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
When it comes to parenting, there are no perfect answers. But that's okay, because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on adoption, visit adoptuskids.org. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Mary A. Joyce, and we're talking about UFOs in the mountains near Cashers, North Carolina. Now, just before the break, you were talking about a buried or underground military installation in that area, and that may be why there is so much UFO activity there. Now, there are many areas throughout the United States and elsewhere in the world that have been described as UFO hotspots. We had an area here in upstate New York up until the late 1990s that had a tremendous amount of activity. Why do you think, other than the military installation, you had mentioned the mountain filled with quartz crystals, why do you think that this area is a hotspot?
Other than those reasons and a possible connection with the Bigfoot and the UFOs, I really don't have any great answers to that one. Those are my best guesses at this point.
When did the first sightings there take place, and who was involved?
All right, the first sightings, I can only tell you the ones that we first learned about, and that was in 2008. And we got a call from a friend who lives in Cashers, and she was all excited because she had gotten up late at night to get something from the kitchen. And when she was coming back from the kitchen, she noticed that her backyard was all lit up, and she said, the moon can't possibly be that bright. So she went and looked, and there was a UFO hovering over her backyard. She, at that point, was living with her mother and her 8-year-old daughter. The next morning, the two adults were talking about what Glennis had seen. And, of course, the 8-year-old is all ears and taking it in. And that day, when they went to the grocery store in the heart of Cashers, the little girl is taking pictures of the sky, probably because of this event at their house the night before. And when they got back, Glennis called again, all excited, because when they looked at the shots that she had taken, there was one that was a stereotypical saucer-shaped UFO smack in the middle of the sun. So the little girl had just aimed it at the sun and snapped it, and of course nobody could see it until it was seen on the camera film.
Was there a pattern of sightings after this?
We became very, very aware of them. Back then, they were happening all the time. The grandmother saw it. Glennis saw them. We began to get so many reports, we would only post the ones that were a little bit more unique. So yes, it was maybe it had been a hot spot long before that, but that is the point where we tuned in on it.
Is it still active today?
It is. Maybe not to the full extent that it has been at certain points, and I haven't figured out if that is because certain times of the year there's more activity, or I don't know what it is. For example, we had a very, very active year in 2015, and the reason I remember that year is because we had so many UFO sightings where the ships looked like nothing you could imagine. On one day in particular, we had 5 different kinds of UFOs hovering over Cashers at night. And 4 of the 5 looked like they were some kind of a meteor. A meteor or an asteroid goes flying through the sky. These just hovered over the town. There was no light coming from within these UFOs, but you could see them because of the light from the ground. And they're just the oddest things in the world. One of them kind of looks like a brass pine cone. And another one actually looks like one of those cheap nutcrackers, the silver ones that are. And they're just very, very odd. And if people want to see what those look like, they can go to our website, skyshipsovercashers.com, and open up the section on skyship photos. And these photos were coming in 2015. Pretty sure I got the year right.
What would you say was the most unusual sighting of all of these?
Well, those came in a cluster, so I don't even know how we can separate them. Each individual one just looked like a rock that ought to be on the ground rather than in the sky, except for the one that looked like a nutcracker. And so it was the cluster of them together on the same night that just was very peculiar.
Now, quite often after activity of this nature in certain places, the so-called men in black will show up, presumably government agents, or perhaps not government agents, but gentlemen who look like they're dressed, they have unusual features. Did anything like that happen in this area?
I'm very familiar with the men in black from just doing my own research. I'm unaware of anything like that happening where we are.
And was there any type of government investigation in the area at all?
No, and we haven't. If they've done it, we're unaware of it. We certainly haven't asked them to become involved.
What was the community's reaction to these sightings?
Well, Glennis, over the years, and this has been since 2008, has been, she's become known as the UFO gal. The community, perhaps because it's more high-end sophisticated people, for the most part, don't want to be tainted as being any kind of weirdo. And so we don't have the frequency of reports from people like you might in another community. That doesn't mean they're not being seen. That means that they just don't want the reputations tainted.
Has this activity drawn UFO researchers from other parts of the country?
Every once in a while, I will get usually an email from somebody who's involved with some kind of research who has contacted us. The most recent one was the director of MUFON, the state director for Tennessee. And she was very interested in what was going on, and she's planning to come down for one of my speaking engagements on Groundhog's Day.
How often do you ever hold other than that, do you ever hold symposiums there on a regular basis?
We don't.
Mm-hmm. You're contemplating doing that? It sounds like that's something that would draw a large crowd.
Well, it probably would. I'll be speaking at the Alien Expo that's going to be in Knoxville in September, and I'll be speaking at the Expedition Bigfoot Museum, which is right near the border of where Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina come together. And that, again, will be the one I'll be doing on Groundhog's Day. For some reason, I'm not real interested in becoming the, I don't know, like the ringleader for something that goes on all the time. I would prefer to use my energy and time doing research and coming up with new things rather than putting that energy into setting up seminars and conventions, because it takes a lot of work and it would divert me from what I find the most interesting.
Now, have there been any reports of close encounters, close encounters or abductions?
I don't hear about abductions. The one situation that made me wonder if somebody had been abducted was they had, two of them had seen giant owls in the same place where Bigfoot and UFOs are frequently seen. And they describe these owls as having like a wingspan of like 8 feet. And that is huge. I had somebody measure my own span with my arms outstretched, and it was about 5.5 feet. So it's like 2.5 feet more than, I'm 5'7", so a 5'7" person. And that's huge. And one of the two witnesses had a very strong spotlight and aimed it right at the eyes of the, I think they said there was 6 to 8 of these giant owls, and there was no reflection in the eyes. And these people had never seen owls like this, and of course had never seen owls with just black eyes that wouldn't reflect light. After that, I read a book that I probably wouldn't have read except for the experience of these people, and it's called Messengers. I think it's just called Messengers, and it's about owls and UFO abductions. And according to this book, many times people who've been abducted will come back with distorted or memories that aren't exactly what happened to the people. And many times they will remember seeing owls. So when somebody has run into, or two people have run into 6 to 8 owls of a giant size with special eyes, you have to wonder if maybe they had experienced an abduction.
The description of the owls, does that match anything like that? I can't remember the exact name of what they called it, but it was like a half bird, half man being that would come and warn people, and then consummated in the collapse of a bridge. Do you recall that story?
I do not, but I could see how that might possibly be a similar situation.
Has there been any correlation between the sightings of these owl creatures and anything happening of a extraordinary nature in addition to the sighting? In other words, have the owls been some type of forebearer of warning or knowledge of some kind?
The last name of the author is Cleland, Cleland, and I know that the bio or the intro with that is done by what's his name, Richard Dolan. So that might be worth somebody's time to really pursue that, because what I've told you is really all I know regarding the owls.
My guest is Mary A. Joyce. She's the editor of the website. And Mary, why don't you tell our listeners the website and also where you can find out more about you and all of the work that you do?
The website is skyshipsovercashiers.com. Cashiers is spelled like a cashier at a store. Skyshipsovercashiers.com. And if you go to that section, you can find anything that we've been talking about. The books that Victor mentioned earlier, there's a summary of each one of them. If you go open up the editor's corner, scroll way down to the bottom, and there's a little bit about each one of the books. All of the books are available through Amazon.
And we'll be back with more of Mary A. Joyce after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Tune in to the Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World with me, host Robin Fritz, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern. I'll cover personal and business intuition, animal communication, mediumship, space clearing, past life regression, shamanic insights, energy healing, soul choice, and more, all to help you tap your own intuitive and healing skills. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Hi, I'm Kelly Fox, host and astrologer of The Astrology Show. Each week, I'll give you access to the current transits, which are a valuable tool that provide astrological information to help unlock the potential each of us has. Understanding the stars can help steer us in the right direction to make better informed choices. So if you're wondering what's going to happen in your week ahead, be sure to tune in to The Astrology Show for guidance, Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Mary A. Joyce. She's the editor of Skyships Over Cashiers website, and we're talking about UFOs and unusual things happening in the areas around northwestern North Carolina. So before the break, we were talking about the sightings that have taken place, the unusual activity. You had mentioned Bigfoot activity. Tell us about the Bigfoot activity.
Well, I'm going to back you up just a bit.
Okay.
One of the things that is very unusual is Glennis had an experience where she saw a 30 to 35 foot hologram of Jesus in her trees, which is very, very unusual. And she was just lying down in her TV room, and it was about, I think, 10:30 at night, and she was looking up at the stars. Now, this makes sense because at that point, she'd been seeing UFOs for about a year. And this particular night, she looked up and there was a UFO, but then something changed. There was this beam of light that came down from the UFO, which was way up in the sky, and hit the parking area next to her house. And she said the beam was about the diameter of a baseball. And then she heard this bang on the side of her, at the side of her house, and it really startled her. And she lives kind of isolated. She's totally surrounded by trees. And so to hear something banging at your house when, can make you kind of nervous. And then she turned, and there was this, it wasn't an apparition, there was an image of Jesus in the trees, and she says it wasn't transparent. It was very solid looking, and there was movement to it. She said that his hair was like soft and moving like in the breeze. And it stayed there for at least 20, maybe 30 minutes. And because of the way holograms work, the fact that a beam came down and hit her driveway, and then the image appeared over in her trees, supports the idea that it could very well have been a UFO that generated the hologram. Depending on how interested you are in this subject, I can share with you the description that she gave of what she saw, or we can just let it go that she saw Jesus in the trees.
No, please do. And I have a question. Prior to this experience, was this woman particularly religious?
No, she was even Jewish.
Okay, all right, go ahead. Tell us what happened.
Right, so she wasn't one of, her mother was Jewish, she was raised Jewish, and she wasn't one of these people who was, looking to find Jesus, so to speak.
Okay, go ahead.
And very seldom do I read things on a radio show, but I'd like to in this case because so many people, in fact, everybody who's heard her story, want to know what she saw. And so I'm going to read it in her words, if that's okay with you.
Please.
Okay. She said, "First I saw him from his head to his sandals. He was looking straight at me with loving but piercing eyes. His eyes were very light, perhaps hazel would describe them. His hair was light, sandy brown with reddish or chestnut highlights. It wasn't one solid color. It was parted in the middle and flowed like freshly washed and dried hair in a gentle breeze. It was beautiful, I mean beautiful. His beard was darker, but it still had the chestnut hue and was neatly trimmed. He was wearing a white flowing muslin robe with 3/4 length sleeves. There was a long, loosely fitting vest jacket over the robe made of the same muslin material. The robe was belted at the waist with a sandy brown cord, which was a little bit darker than his hair. The knot in the cord was on his left side. A leather pouch on a long leather cord hung from his neck. In his right hand, he held a rod that came up to his shoulder. It was shiny wood that had irregularities you'd find on a tree branch. It was larger at the top and tapered downward. His brown sandals had thick soles with a cord over the arch of each foot and another cord wrapped around each ankle. They looked very comfortable. That was her written description of what she saw. And it might be interesting to note that she is a hairdresser. So that might explain why she was paying so much attention to the color of his hair and how it flowed like freshly washed hair in a gentle breeze.
Well, the detail involved in her description is amazing.
Well, it was there for 20 or 30 minutes, and she never took her eyes off of it. So she had time to really absorb what she was seeing.
What was her reaction to this?
She was just in awe. In her words, she said, "I was blown away. I was truly blown away." She felt so humbled.
And what was her response after the fact? Did she make any change in her life after the fact, or?
Yeah, I would say she's become not a believer in any of the traditional forms of Christianity, but she has come to understand that the messenger, which she has been told in her messages when she's asked questions, that Jesus or Yeshua was a man from the future who would come back periodically to help as others did, to help mankind evolve or elevate.
So the UFO generating the hologram, does that mean that you're assuming, not assuming, but thinking that this UFO was actually from our future?
The message that she received was that Yeshua, or Jesus, was a man from our future, and she actually had quite a bit of information. I don't have it right in front of me, but it talked about how when Jesus was raised up in a cloud, it was actually a UFO. It talked about the star that the wise men followed was another UFO. It ties into it ties Christianity together with the space and the ETs in a very dramatic way.
That's really fascinating. That's the first time I've heard that concept described. Has anyone else had a similar experience to that?
That is the only one we've had of an image like that. Now, it was like she was prepared for what happened to her. It actually happened in steps. And I have to emphasize, she never saw a UFO till she moved to Cashers. So, it's not something that she's lived in South Africa, and she's lived in London, and she's lived in Houston. I think she was out in California, too. So she never had these experiences until Cashers. I just thought that should be emphasized. And with that, I forgot what I was going to say next.
Let's go ahead. Go ahead, please. I was going to tell you that this just wasn't sprung on her. It was like she was kind of prepared for it in steps. And the first step was she began to see orbs in her trees around her house, and she had never experienced that before. And then on another occasion, she was in her house, and in her kitchen, she has like a bar that's made out of a nice piece of irregular wood. And so when you look out from the bar, you see the living room in one direction, and you see the room that she used for her salon in the other direction. So one day, it was very brief, but she saw what she said was a spaceman that appeared that she could see from her kitchen. It was just there for momentarily. If I remember correctly, it was dressed like in a maroon type outfit. It was human size, but she never saw the face. This happened another time, and then a third time. And the third time, when she did see the face, it was the face of Jesus. So from the orbs to the three apparitions not apparitions, because that sounds ghostly. These appear in like physical form. And those all happened before the big image appeared in the trees. That's fascinating.
To this day, I find it fascinating.
Have you researched or found anything comparable to this elsewhere out of your area?
Well, you have to go back and think about some of the miracle stories that you hear, especially in the Catholic Church, regarding apparitions of the Virgin Mary. I'm going back on my reading from years and years ago. But she would show up in the brilliance of the sun. Well,
right, Portugal, Fatima.
Right, and Medjugorje, and there's some other ones too. Mm-hmm. But I thought about the photo that Devin, the 8-year-old, took, and we couldn't see the UFO hidden in the sun, but you could in the film. So maybe a UFO was hiding in the sun and projecting images just like happened in Cashers. And I should add that when she saw the apparition in the tree, she only could see it from one position. She went into another room to look, and she couldn't see it. So if she moved, she couldn't see it. If she stayed in the one spot, she could see it, which again indicates it was most likely a hologram.
Has she had any other experiences since that happened?
Well, she's been seeing UFOs ever since. And we just call her our sky watcher in Cashers. And we periodically will post photos that she's taken. I think some of the most fascinating ones go back to 2015.
And does she have any message that she delivers based upon these experiences? Is she sharing a message?
She's shared her story, and we have posted her story on our website. She's kind of shy about talking. Not in when she's in a salon, she will talk her head off with anybody who's there. But to get up in front of an audience and talk, she freezes up. And we learned this when we included her in a presentation we were doing one time, and it just made her nervous beyond belief. So her message has come out through the website, but she's not really interested in going on the road to tell her tale.
Not just the tale of what happened, but is she delivering any type of spiritual message based upon her experience? And when I say delivering it through any media rather than getting up in front of a crowd.
Believe it or not, Evelyn Gordon, who is the co-founder of this website, and I don't talk about this very much because I really would like to stay in the realm of the investigator and the newspaper type person. But we've been receiving messages. They started for me back in 1986 was the first time I got one. And so we've gotten messages and some of the ones we will get, and we're told to put them on the website. They don't come through for the public all that often, but we do have a section called Skyship Messages. And you can find that again on the homepage.
My guest is Mary A. Joyce. She's the editor of Skyships Over Caches. We're talking about UFOs, various types of unusual phenomenon in that area, and we'll be back with more of Mary after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Change and growth are part of natural life, and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Mary A. Joyce. She's the editor of Skyships Over Caches. Mary, before the break, we were talking about these amazing experiences that have happened in your area. We started talking a little bit about Bigfoot. Tell us about Bigfoot in that area.
Like I said, we've been seeing Bigfoot in the same areas where we've seen lots of UFO sightings. My most direct personal experience was a man who's been raised here in the mountains and lives at the top of one of these ridges. And he's also a hunter. And he's one of the people who's, seen the UFOs, and he knows where they take shelter on land that's adjacent to where he lives. And so he took me there one day, And we went up a gravel road, single lane, and parked the car. And then we walked about a half mile. And when we started getting closer to where the cave was that he wanted to show me, we heard something that sounded like a bird, but not quite like a bird. And then in the direction of the cave, there was like an answer, another bird sound that didn't sound quite like a bird sound. And then everything went silent. And both he and I felt like that was one Bigfoot warning another Bigfoot that we were headed in their direction. I did see one or two footprints in the embankment on the path. Well, it wasn't a path. He had to use a sickle to cut weeds to get through to where we were going. And so I have a picture of that cave on the website. And personally, I'm convinced that was one UFO. I mean, one Bigfoot, communicating with another one.
Let's go from big to little. Your most recent book is called Cherokee Little People Were Real. What's the story behind that?
I'm a reluctant author. I never set out to be a writer or to do a book. Things come to me that nobody else has recorded, and I feel like it's important to save it. When I first moved to North Carolina, which was in 1998, I began to hear rumors or tales about Cherokee Little People. I didn't really pay a lot of attention to them because it just sounded like folklore. Then one day, an elderly man, Walter Middleton, who was well known in this area. He was a World War II hero. He was a pastor in the area for over 40 years. Had a sterling reputation. And so when he told me the little people were real, I paid attention. And he said when he was a young man, after World War II, that he was involved in the construction crews at Western Carolina University, which is about 20 minutes away from where I live. And so back in the 30s and 40s, when they were cutting into what was supposed to be virgin land to build these many buildings on the campus, they were constantly running into these little tunnels. All the tunnels were square cut in dense red clay, and the top of each tunnel was arched, and that gives greater support to any kind of a tunnel. And they also found skeletons. And one science professor had a small skeleton or skull sitting on his desk. I felt like it was his decorative conversation piece. And one day, a English teacher from the high school picked it up and looked at it real closely, and she said, "This is not a child's skull. It has all of its wisdom teeth." Another thing that they told me a lot of stories. One old-timer would lead me to another, and so for a time, I would spend Saturdays around kitchen tables interviewing these old-timers, and I'm so glad that I did because I think they've all passed away now.
And is there still a Cherokee community in the area?
Yes, there is the Cherokee, they call it the Res, but it's just, actually, if I could climb over the mountain where I live, I would come down on the other side and be on the reservation.
And have you met with any of the Cherokee people there and asked them about this?
Absolutely, absolutely. The most recent story that I've gotten from one of the Cherokees was a young woman, and she was telling me that when she was her family to this day has a place in the more remote section of the reservation where they have a small trailer that has, restrooms and a little kitchen. And so the whole family or the clan will go up there for picnics. And she said one day when she was little, all the small children were playing hide and go seek. And she went to hide in the shower of this little trailer. And when she pulled back the curtain, there was a little Cherokee little person there just grinning from ear to ear because he was having fun, because the children were having fun. So that's the most recent story that I have regarding the little people.
Is there a connection between the little people and UFO sightings?
I know that it almost seems to be universal that the Indians, no matter which tribe they are, feel like they came from the stars. the Cherokee believed they came from the Pleiades, and they hide a lot of their origin stories in stories about the seven sisters. And the seven sisters represent the seven stars in the Pleiades. So, in our opinion, they could very well have been from the stars. Also, back in 1940, there was one of these historic floods on the Tuckasegee River, which is in this area. And we're talking everything getting washed away. And there was a man who at the time was like a 5-year-old boy, and he found something he called his lead head. And it was it was oval-shaped, about 1.25 inches long, and on each side of it was like a leprechaun's face with the nose and the pointed ears and everything. And this was washed out from very, very deep levels of soil. So it was old. And it had been cast because you could see a seam around the edges of it. And to this day, it's his treasure that he protects. He did let me get a picture of it, which I've included in my book about the Cherokee Little People.
Have you searched for or found any correlation between the Cherokee Little People and the Navajo Skinwalkers?
I've not pursued that, and I've not heard about it.
Okay, are you not familiar with the Navajo Skinwalkers then, right?
Yes, but I've never heard anything from the Cherokee connecting with that.
Okay, let's switch gears and discuss your book, Tangible Evidence of Jesus. What inspired you to write that book?
Well, I hinted at this earlier that I prefer to wear my newspaper hat most of the time, but I've had some personal experiences that, don't fit in that category. And I was awakened one night about 3 o'clock in the morning, and Jesus appeared, and he said he wanted me to write a book so that we would get a better understanding of who he really was. And he wanted it done in 30 days. Well, I'm going, holy cow, how do you turn out a book in 30 days? Well, after I kind of got my wits about me, I realized that out of sheer curiosity, which I have an abundance of, I'd done an awful lot of research. And there's a lot of research, scientific and archaeological information about Jesus. It's usually buried in books that most people are never going to read because it's laborious reading, and things that are written by most scholars can be tedious, even if the information in and of itself is fascinating. And so I took this information and put it together in a very condensed, easy-to-read form, and there are lots of photos and images to go with it. I call it a picture book for adults.
And what did the archaeological research show? What evidence can you share with us?
Well, there's too much to share in the space of time that we have. The one I really like to share with people is they have found a tomb that they call the Jesus tomb. And this was done by an archaeologist. I forget. It's one of the North Carolina universities. I think it's North Carolina University, but if not, it was Duke, one of the two. And they found buried in the hillside this family tomb. Now, at the time of Jesus, they would use the side of a hill outside the city, and they would dig a cave. And in the center, they would create a square room that would be like the main room. And then on the 3 walls, there would be niches that they would cut out, and that's where they would give the final burial to the people. Now, for a brief period of time, like 100 years, no more than about 100 years, the Jews would put the dead body in the main room of these tombs, close up the tomb, and leave the body there for a year so that all the soft tissue would disappear. Then they would open up the tomb, and they would put the bones in stone boxes called ossuaries, and they would slide those into these niches that were carved on the 3 walls in the tomb. And the tradition was that the most important person would be buried in the tomb or in the niche immediately to the right. In there, they found 3 ossuaries, all with inscriptions on them. One said Jesus, son of Joseph. One said it was in the familiar form, but it was Mary in the familiar form. with the title Mar, M-A-R, in front of it, which is the equivalent of Lord for a female. And the third one is really thought-provoking because it says, Judah, son of Jesus. To amplify that this might indeed be the burial tomb of Jesus, in some of the other notches, they found names that are familiar and associated with Jesus from the Old Testament, including one that is labeled Josie, which was his brother, and that was the nickname that Jesus gave him. Nicknames would not normally be used in a Jewish burial, but in this case, that was the nickname that was used.
That's fascinating, and we're definitely going to have you back on to talk more about that book and much of your research. My guest, Mary Joyce, she's the editor of Skyships Over Caches. Mary, please tell our listeners one more time where they can find out more about you and this amazing work.
The website is skyshipsovercaches.com. If you go to the editor's corner and scroll down to the bottom, you can find my bio as well as brief summaries about my 3 books, which are Cherokee Little People Were Real, Tangible Evidence of Jesus Left Behind for Us to Find, and Underground Military Bases Hidden in North Carolina Mountains. All the books are available through Amazon.
Mary, thank you so much for joining us, and we definitely have to have you back again. And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.